Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel. Click that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. I want to talk a little bit about some of the press and the coverage that they're giving for specific fighters. Something has been said by Ness of the Boxing Voice regarding Deontay Wilder, which I think is a ludicrous statement, and I want to discuss that. And I'm not trying to pick on Ness here or anything, or the Boxing Voice, because for me, it's a reflection of what's occurring a lot more commonly now among the boxing press, not just the big boys. You expect it from the big boys. You expect a certain element of bias from the big corporate media companies because they affiliate with networks, or rather they are networks, as often is the case, such as Sky, for instance, who are affiliated with promoters and so forth. So therefore they air certain shows with fighters that will appear on there, and they have an investment essentially and an interest in those fighters doing particularly well. So you would expect Sky to be somewhat biased in favor of Anthony Joshua. You would expect, or Matchroom fighters in general. You would expect, is the PBC aired on Fox in the US? I believe it is, right? So you'd expect Fox to be somewhat biased in favor of PBC fighters. You'd expect DAZN fighters or Matchroom fighters to be being given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the commentary on DAZN. We don't want that as fans, and we want to hold these media organizations accountable. But because of that conflict of interest, we've come to understand it. Whereas of late, there's been this accusation levied at, I guess you could say, the more grassroots type of media organizations that have grown from nothing, fan channels basically, that have become big channels. We're starting to see an element of bias or spin, you could say, a narrative that's spun to portray a fighter in a favorable light. And a lot of people have taken exception to this. What I want to do in this video is talk about one of these ludicrous claims, the latest one that's happened from the Boxing Voice, and then talk about why I understand how this sort of thing can actually occur. And I want to just discuss this with you guys, and I want to hear everybody's opinions on this, and also what potential solutions there could be. Before we get into that, I do want to talk about another little topic that has occurred. Touching really quickly upon Devin Haney, he has said that Ryan Garcia is truly a definition of a coward, and that he ducked him and he ducked Jorge Linares, so that he shouldn't basically be talking so much rubbish about him, saying that he would sleep him after their fight on his after Haney's fight on his own Instagram story. Well, he also went on to say Jorge Linares doesn't hit as hard as I thought he would hit. But prior to that, he said he's one of the biggest punchers in the division. He's not. He's a combination puncher. He's very, very crisp. So I understand why he's coming out with these topics, with these comments. But yeah, look, it's one of those scenarios, I think, whereby I get why he's saying what he's saying, and he's starting to feel as though he's being hated. And that could actually work for him. Some of the tweets he's putting out there that he can't win no matter what he does, it could work for him. It could create a me versus the world mentality. But he has to be very, very careful not to assume that he is the finished article, because he could get unstuck. Because I promise you, and I love Jorge Linares. He's one of my favorite fighters in the last however many years to watch. Since I've been running these channels, he's one of my favorite fighters to watch. I love watching him. I think he's a beautiful boxer. But he's not one of the biggest punchers in this division. It's his third weight category. He doesn't hit as hard as the bigger punchers in this division. He's got to be very careful if he starts to think that he's the finished article and that no one can suddenly hurt him. So that's just a little comment there on Devin Haney. The final thing I want to discuss in this particular video, Ness from on the Boxing Voice. Listen, you know, when many years ago, when the Boxing Voice first took off, I used to sit there. I used to work nights, right? And I used to sit there on my own at like 2, 3 in the morning when it was coming on over there. I used to have it on in the background. And I never called into the show, but I was one of the first listeners when they were getting that show up and running. I used to try and listen to it, because what else was I going to do at 2, 3 in the morning working night shifts on my own, right? And it was good to hear different fans from all over the world give their opinions. It was an enjoyable thing. And so I had it on. So I'm not a hater of the Boxing Voice or anything like that. I think they were brilliant in the way they found a real hole in the market at the time. I thought it was a really clever thing to do, and I thought they did it very, very well. But in the past, Ness himself has spoken about how certain boxing media groups found themselves in a position where they almost had to be They couldn't speak freely because they were being expelled from press conferences, and he said that it even happened to him. We also know that Kugan Cassius was not allowed to attend the Tyson Fury-Vladimir Klitschko fight. So as a result, one of the worrying things is that a lot of these boxing channels have to be very, very careful about how they word things, or, you know, how against the grain they can go. Otherwise, they can have their access taken away. And all these fans that are demanding that these guys remain honest, and not just honest, but ask the difficult questions. A lot of the fans that are demanding this of those channels, if those channels had their access switched off, those same fans aren't going to be tuning into those channels anymore. So they're in a real predicament, okay? A lot of people were critical, for instance, when Mark Tibbs asked them to take down his interviews. But again, what do you do in that position? It's a difficult position for them to be in, right? When it came to O'Hara Davis, look how well he speaks of Kugan Cassius, because he says there were times and moments where I said things that could have got me into trouble, and Kugan, rather than thinking about the clickbait and the views, he decided not to put that interview up, and he told me he wouldn't because it would cause me a problem because what I said was too controversial. So I sort of respect that. Now, I know a lot of you out there don't respect that, and you've made your opinions to me clear on that because you see it as him sacrificing journalistic integrity in favor of personal relationships. But those personal relationships are what enable the lifeline of this style of journalism. So you have to understand the difficult situation they're in. And so I get it. I do. Okay, I understand that. But even if you do have these personal relationships and you value them and you respect these fighters and you care about their well-being, you still have to be able to understand that the public are not stupid. Defend them where you feel they need to be defended. If a fighter, for instance, is accused of quitting and you know him personally and you feel like you know his heart and he's got a warrior spirit and he's a friend of yours maybe and you care about him, you may come out publicly and defend him, right? But there is a limit as to the level of absurdity that you're able to sell to the public without sacrificing that journalistic integrity to the point where you almost lose viability in their eyes. You have to be able to be respected and believable as a source. Whereas some of the stuff that Ness from the Boxing Voice has been saying, I'm sorry to say, it's virgin very much. In fact, it's not virgin. It's beyond virgin on fanboy territory. He came out and he basically said that Deontay Wilder has been looking to give black athletes opportunities, not just black athletes, but athletes of minority backgrounds. He says this is the reason he fought Ortiz, and that Ortiz was kept away from Anthony Joshua by Matchroom. He wasn't given an opportunity by Golden Boy, and he was sort of implying that it might be because he was a black Cuban, he said. Whereas Deontay Wilder gave him that opportunity, and he said that Joe Louis in the past had spoken about how if you're a friend of somebody, you give them the opportunity for a fight because you're enabling them to earn money. He also did the same for Malik Scott. So he's saying, look, this is another example of that. He said Tyson Fury, who's a gypsy, another example of that. Chris Arreola, a Mexican, another example of that. Dude, what are you talking about, man? Like, listen, I'm sure... He was also saying how Deontay Wilder did this because Ortiz also has an ill daughter, a girl who's got some health issues. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. It does jog my memory about something. I know there's something going on with Ortiz's daughter, but I don't remember the details. I know that Deontay Wilder has a daughter with some health issues, and so as a result, he fought very hard to try and provide a better life for her, and that's admirable. But don't come and tell me that he took these fights as some sort of charitable case. He took these fights, as Spencer Fearon rightly points out, because he thought he could win them. Now, why didn't Anthony Joshua put Ortiz in the ring why didn't Hearn put Ortiz in the ring with AJ? Because Anthony Joshua, at the time, was a big star as well. But Ortiz was younger than he is now, obviously, than when he fought Wilder. He was younger, and he was still considered a really dangerous fighter. But he stunk the joint out when he fought Malik Scott. And so it might have been a high-risk, low-reward sort of fight for a British audience, okay? Now, you might want to call that a duck as well. I don't know. If you want to call it a duck, that's a different topic. But don't suggest that somehow he was kept out of the fight for what? Because he's black? Anthony Joshua's black. Like, what are you guys talking about? Then he goes on to say, like I said, about Tyson Fury and being a gypsy. All of a sudden, being a traveler is high on the priority of minority rights for Deontay Wilder. What are we talking about over here? The reason he fought Tyson Fury is because he was a massive name in the heavyweight division that had been out for 3 years, put on 100 pounds, abused his body with more drugs than Charlie Sheen at one of his Malibu orgy parties. This is why he figured this guy's washed. The man's got titties. Ain't no man with a cleavage coming out and beating me. That's what Deontay Wilder was thinking. And then he turns up, he fights Sefa Seferi, and who else did he fight? He fought one more dude, his name escapes me right now. He beat them up, and then all of a sudden they're looking at him thinking, okay, he's fat, he doesn't move around the ring like that anymore. The dude, if he sits on the back of the bus is going to do a wheelie. Let's put him in the ring. What do you know? The Tyson Fury turns up. Backfired. As for Chris Arreola, oh, he wanted to help out a Mexican? Why didn't he help out the more dangerous Mexican in Andy Ruiz? Come on, man. And I'm not saying any of this to hate on Deontay Wilder by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, I know a lot of people out there say, oh, he held that belt hostage and so on and so forth. I'm not accusing him of anything like that. I'm simply being honest about the fact that I believe he took those fights because he felt they were winnable fights. He wasn't engaging in some sort of altruistic act of generosity. Come on, man. Like, who are you guys kidding? Listen, I understand if you want to toe the line for Wilder. Maybe, you know which side your bread's buttered on. I get that. I don't hold that against the Boxing Voice because I understand what's going on. There are ways of doing it. Ellie Sekbak sometimes does it in my opinion, a terrible way. When he's walking up to fighters he was walking up to fighters and I think Benavidez was one of them. He was walking up to random fighters and the question, oh man, Ellie, the question was, in what round does Anthony Joshua knock out Tyson Fury? Oh, God. Dude, ask them their opinion, man. If you want, share your opinion too. And say, personally, I think AJ gets the better of Fury. I think he stops him. That's cool. But you can't lead with a question like that. And this is why recently Josh Taylor was... Ellie went to ask him something and Josh Taylor said, why don't you go and ask Ramirez? He's the one you're buddies with, because he didn't like the fact that there was a lack of impartiality in the way he was reporting. And I don't want to see the Boxing Voice, which developed initially as a channel which was given a plethora of voices, a platform to a plethora of voices from all over the United States and indeed the world, because it was a phone-in show. I don't want to see it becoming an overtly, a channel that's overtly supporting specific fighters. But like I said, I understand why they feel the need to do these things, especially because the Boxing Voice specifically has been denied access in the past. So does this raise questions about the wider question of the influence of promoters and the power they have, the influence over journalists and access, promoters having too much of a say when it comes to which judges are appointed to fights and stuff like that? So is this just a symptom of that? And as a sport, we need to start considering some sort of regulatory body. And I wouldn't want to see a single governing body like the UFC has, like MMA has the UFC predominantly, where there's, one overarching ruler, so to speak, because you can see the fighters there don't get paid what they deserve to get paid. I know a lot of people want to see the best fight and the best all the time, but when that happens, you don't often see fights marinate. And as a result of that in the UFC, there aren't as many mouth-watering prospects on the horizon, in my humble opinion. They end up fighting each other too often. And so you don't have that thing where it marinates. With boxing can also get it wrong. Oftentimes it marinates far too long to the point where we don't see the best fight in the best, or we don't see fights we really wanted to see. So boxing hasn't got the right balance either. But the point I'm making here is, should there be some sort of overarching regulatory body which is, which prevents promoters having the influence they have? But even then, what's to stop them being corrupt? There's so many question marks here. But let me know what you think about all this. Does it frustrate you when you hear the Boxing Voice talk about these sorts of things? And not just the Boxing Voice, I'm not picking on them. This is just one incident that's happened to have occurred that I've seen on Twitter today. But it's not something that, is exclusive to them. So let me know what you think, guys. Thanks for watching, everyone. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.